All right, well, that's the Sunday papers, and now we'll go straight to our program guest. And this morning, the Attorney-General, Senator George Brandis, joins us from our Canberra studios. Senator, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Barrie.
Can we start by getting your response to what appears to be the third beheading by IS, and this time it's an aid worker?
Well, like everyone else, I imagine, Barrie, I'm appalled by this. It just serves to demonstrate, not that it's really necessary for there to be more evidence, how barbaric and evil these people are. This is a problem for the world, and that is why we in Australia are engaged. We need to be engaged. It affects particularly the Western world.
Now, in the video that was released with this, they say the aid worker has paid the price for Britain's support of the United States because Britain couldn't say no to the US. Is there a message there for Australia, and how would the government respond to that?
Well, the message is that that Western nations in particular are threatened by ISIL. But that is not news, Barrie. This is yet another barbarity, yet another illustration of a point that Prime Minister Abbott and Prime Minister Cameron and President Obama and other Western leaders have been making for some time now, that this terrorist entity, ISIL, is a fundamental threat to the Western world in particular.
Now, does it follow that because the terror warning is now rated high in Australia, that a terrorist attack in this country is now likely to happen?
That's what that's the descriptor of that level of the National Public Alert System. The designation high means that the agencies assess that a terrorist attack is likely.
But is there something wrong with the categories? Because the Prime Minister says that you have no specific intelligence, an attack is not imminent, and yet you say a threat is likely. Does that point to the fact that maybe you need a separate category?
Well, 2 points to be made about that, Barrie. First of all, there's not an inconsistency. The next level up, which is extreme, which we haven't reached, is reached when a terrorist attack is imminent. So we're not saying that a terrorist attack is imminent. The Prime Minister is correct to say that there is no specific intelligence of any specific attack. But what we do have, in the words of the Director-General David Irvine, is an increase in the general threat environment, and the agencies pick that up in various ways. They pick it up from the increase in the amount of chatter. They pick it up from the intelligence that we receive from our international partners, and in a variety of ways. Now, that's the first point I wanted to make. But secondly, can I point out to you that as part of the overall review of Australia's counter-terrorism posture, which is being led by PM&C, we are examining the calibrations and the descriptors in the National Public Alert System.
In the United States, though, President Obama says the US has not detected specific plotting against them. Is that consistent with the position in Australia as well, or is Australia more at risk than the United States?
Well, I'm not going to comment on what President Obama may have said. My job and the job of ASIO and the other intelligence agencies is to make assessments of the situation in Australia. They use their best professional analytical judgment to make those assessments, and the government follows their advice, as we should. Where
exactly is the law lacking, in your view, in Australia? What are your frustrations, and what changes do you need to make to be more effective?
Well, there are three tranches of legislation that I have either introduced or will introduce shortly. The first tranche, which was introduced in the last sitting week before the winter recess, and will, I expect, come back to the Parliament in the next sitting fortnight, is the agency powers legislation. There were various respects in which the intelligence agencies, such as ASIO, felt constrained under the existing Act, and as a result of a bipartisan recommendation of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, the government has moved in that respect. So that's the agency powers legislation. Then there's the foreign fighters legislation, which I expect to introduce next week and is being finalised as we speak. That will change certain of the criminal offences. It will introduce 2 new criminal offences, one of advocacy of terrorism and the other of travelling to a proscribed place, which the Minister for Foreign Affairs may proscribe as effectively a no-go zone. It will also deal with law enforcement issues such as the thresholds for arrest, for example, and it will also deal with the facilitation of proof of conduct in where foreign evidence is relied upon. Lastly, later in the year, I will introduce legislation to mandate the retention of metadata. That scheme is being discussed by ASIO and the telcos and the ISPs at the moment.
Well, just let's deal with the second one on the foreign fighters. What you're saying there then is at the moment it's unclear as to whether or not you can arrest people when they return from fighting overseas?
No, I'm not saying that. You can, and under an Act of 1978, the Foreign Incursions and Recruitment Act, it is a crime against Australian law to be involved in a foreign civil war. But to give effect to those prohibitions or to prosecute for those offences, there are thresholds which we think are too high. So we are amending the law to enable arrest and prosecution to be made to be easier.
Can you give us a sense of what that means? So if the threshold is too high, what do you do to make it easier for the authorities to make these arrests?
Well, the particular provision I mentioned operates on the threshold of a reasonable belief. Now, in most of the states, the threshold for arrest is in fact a reasonable suspicion, but that isn't reflected in the Commonwealth legislation. So we are lowering the threshold of satisfaction for the police in enforcing terrorism offences from a reasonable belief to a reasonable suspicion.
Now, is it true that you're urging families, you're saying to families that try and encourage some of the younger people who are fighting overseas to come home?
Well, it all depends on the circumstances of the particular case. I mean, let's be frank, if there are hardened terrorists who are fighting overseas, we don't want to see those people come back to our shores. But what that article was directed at were very young people, teenagers. We're not talking about hardened terrorists, but if we could stop youngsters, teenagers from falling into the snares of ISIL or Jabhat al-Nusra or other terrorist organisations through parental intervention and other strategies, then we hope to be able to rescue them before they commit these crimes.
But if they came back, if they came home, surely they would face, under the prospect of reasonable suspicion, they would face the prospect of being arrested and spending a long time in jail.
Well, it all depends on the facts of the particular case, Barrie.
And just how involved they've been while overseas.
That's right.
Do you know the names of these people who are fighting overseas?
The agencies do have a clear idea of the identity of some of them. It's not right to say that we know the identity of all of them, but as Mr Irvine has said, our best assessment is that at the moment there are 60 or so Australians fighting in the Middle East.
So just to clear up this point that adds to the threat at home, if you know who they are, they're likely to be arrested, surely.
Well, we don't know who they all are. That was my answer to your previous question. We know the identity of some of them. The identity of some of them, like Elamar and Sharif, is a matter of public knowledge. We know the identity of others whose identity is not a matter of public knowledge, but we can't say that we know the identity of all of them.
And even though some of them whose identities are known, is there a risk that they could get back into Australia undetected?
Well, we're going to ensure that that doesn't happen. The whole purpose and intent of the government is to ensure that our laws are in as strong a shape as they can be to protect the Australian homeland, to ensure that any foreign fighter who returns and has committed a crime by participating in the civil war in Syria and northern Iraq will be prosecuted.
Now, if I can clear up just one other confusion that I seem to be detecting, is that the Prime Minister said in his videotape overnight that the government is doing everything, and he underlined that, he said it again, everything to protect you, which does ring alarm bells in a sense, and yet you're saying that you should go about your normal life. Can you clear that up as to how we can, how the public is to respond to that kind of thing?
Well, I don't know why you think there's any confusion about that, Barry. I mean, the reason we have these public terror alert levels is that there are two main reasons, and Acting Commissioner Colvin made this clear on Friday. One is to inform the public so as to make them aware of what the government's and the intelligence agencies' appraisal of the level of risk to Australia is. But the second reason is reassurance, so that people can know that although we assess the threat level to be high, the police are onto this, the intelligence agencies are onto this, and that all appropriate steps that need to be made are being taken. And that's why the Prime Minister, like David Irvine and Acting Commissioner Colvin, have all said that people should go about their normal lives. They should be vigilant for their own safety, but they should go about their normal lives.
So it hasn't reached a stage where you're saying avoid large crowds, for example?
No, we're not saying that at all. In fact, we're saying the opposite. We're saying that you should go to the footy finals, you should go about your ordinary life in the same way you always have, reassured that the government is aware of the threat, aware of the risk, and has taken appropriate steps, particularly in relation to the allocation of policing resources to ensure that people are kept safe.
And the Prime Minister did mention at the Friday news conference that there will be a modest PR campaign or an awareness campaign. Yeah. Can you say what that will involve?
It will involve some advertising to make people aware of the importance of vigilance. We need to publicise the call number 1800 123 400, so that if people do see something that is genuine, that is suspicious, particularly around government buildings, military facilities and such like, they should call that number 1800 123 400.
Minister, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, Barrie.